we're rolling. Off you go.
Great. Right, I'm here in Batley in West Yorkshire. I'm delighted to be here because it is very beautiful actually, but it finds itself at the epicentre, at the very heart of a political battle in which you have George Galloway, remember him, of Big Brother Cat fame.
Now would you like me to be the cat?
Yes, please. It's okay.
And you've got the Conservatives and Labour really fighting to ensure that Labour keeps it, a Labour seat, of course, and two, the Tories are finding themselves in a really, really good and healthy position. You've got the Brexit Party that have refused to stand here. You've got Lawrence Fox's Reclaim Party have refused to stand here. You've got George Galloway nipping at the heels of Labour in a constituency with a big Muslim population. George Galloway is a very popular candidate with Muslim voters. So it could go either way, especially given that the Brexit Party vote and an independent vote was so big in the last election. That's no longer there in this one. So we're seeing basically on the ground what the prospects are, what voters really actually care about here, and basically to try and speak about those very issues. So let's get to it.
Joshua Shears.
Councillor
Joshua Shears. Let's not forget titles. And I'm 19 years old.
So you're 19, right?
Yes.
You are the youngest councillor to be elected here in
47 years.
Which is amazing.
It is.
But why are you so passionate about politics? Most people your age just want to go out and get pissed, to be frank.
Yeah, they do.
So what is it that motivates you to actually get involved in it?
I've researched multiple different aspects of politics. I've researched the Conservative Party, I've researched Labour, I've had a look into things like your cancel cultures, British history, and I think as a country we've got so much to be proud of, and we can do so many great things if we put our mind to it. And I think in politics we have too many people that, like I was saying about Tracy Brabin, that want to be somebody rather than do something. I had a few problems with the previous, and I emailed her, I went to one of her surgeries and I passed on my concerns to her. She said, I'm going to go over to PMQs, I'm going to give questions to the Prime Minister, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I watched PMQs for the last 6 weeks when I last went to her, not a single mention of it. She's all for, I'm going to get a picture, I'm going to get the face at news, I'm going to say I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But then, once she's had that picture, once it's been posted in newspaper, she ain't interested.
One reason why I won't vote for Labour is because we've had Tracy Brabin, and she was meant to come and have a meeting with everyone at Nash Pub, and she never turned up for like 6 months, and she just kept putting us back. Like this town's got major problems. It's like there's gangs of Asians with knives, there's gangs of white people fly about on motorbikes and no one does know about it. And you go to her and she just not happens.
So you're worried about crime then?
Yeah, there's areas going to rubbish, man. It used to be a nice place to live, now it's a bit dodgy.
In Batley Spen right now, it's one of your typical traditional Labour constituencies, and the state of Labour is right now, at Fox's, where I work at Fox's Biscuits, I've spoken to many people about the
Which is one of the biggest, is it the biggest employer in the area?
In the area, yeah. I've spoken to many people about the by-election and which way they're going to be voting, and a lot of them are actually going away from Labour because of how the party is right now and how Keir Starmer's currently leading the party, and they're going to like your independents and your Conservatives. So I am very, very confident that we could be seeing something similar to what Hartlepool. I am very confident Batley Spen could turn blue in this by-election.
And what do you think how would that benefit this area though if the Tories were elected?
Well, one of the main policies which the Conservative Party has is the levelling up agenda. And what we can do as we're coming out of this pandemic with a Conservative Member of Parliament, we can now go to the government, as councillors we can work with the Conservative Member of Parliament, go to the government and then get the investment, what we need to help jobs in the local area, support businesses and support local families as we start coming out of this pandemic to build back better. What
do you think actually we need to see in places like Batley and Spen? Because for many people, buses and things like that are even really important. Access to actually being able to access job opportunities by being able to travel to places. Do you think we are focusing on those sort of things as much as we should be? Because a lot of what you hear from London is, we need to build HS2, we need to prioritise the North East even. And do you think places like West Yorkshire are actually being given enough of a spotlight?
I think over the past few years we have seen a significant north-south divide, but I think now with the government that we've got, we are starting to see more investment coming into the north. But I think what we still need to continue doing is investing more into northern manufacturing, into northern transportation, and continuing this level of agenda.
Yeah.
One thing that we could do is investing more into employment, getting more jobs and more people into jobs in Batley and Spen. And I think with a Member of Parliament with the Conservative Party here in Batley and Spen, we could definitely work upon that.
I have voted once before Paul Adahan.
All right, okay.
Because he's done a lot for this community, and he ain't even an MP or out.
No.
You know?
I'm with Paul Halloran right now, who stood in 2019
Correct.
and came third
Correct.
in this constituency.
Yes.
You've got a very interesting perspective. But you're basically on the ground, you know all about the local area. You came very close in 2019. You were a thorn in the Tory side, and you're going to continue to be, but you're not standing in this election, and I want to know why and what you think is going to happen.
The person that is running, listen, I don't agree with a lot of George Galloway says,
No.
but George Galloway is a political animal. He knows what he's doing. George Galloway is probably running the best campaign of getting out there. But yeah, the Tories they're anonymous, and whether they think they've got it in the bag. And I think they're running a very, very similar campaign to what Tracy Brabin did for the Lord Mayor, for the mayoral elections, is kind of keep a low profile, don't say a great deal, agree with certain things, just float in, don't make any waves, and hopefully will not drop any. George really is a big pro Jeremy Corbyn, and everybody round here, I know, was very anti Jeremy Corbyn, and that was going back to the election in 2019. There was a few things at play. There was Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, there was Brexit, and that, I think what happened was when people got to the polling booth, they wanted to vote for me and said, but if I vote for Paul, and Labour getting nationally, crossing the Conservative box.
We've been out and about in Batley today, speaking to a Conservative councillor, to a bloke that doesn't actually want to vote, but who did vote in the last election. And it's been really interesting seeing George Galloway's face everywhere. And notice the red, right? They know which vote they're going for. So George Galloway is very popular among Batley's and Spen's Muslim community. And for many socialists who really don't like Sir Keir Starmer, George Galloway seems to be cutting through.
But I think George is cutting through a few things, really.
Yeah.
Listen, it's crime, it's disorder, and people say this is a national election. It is. But there's things like dog fouling. You know what I'm saying? It's what every day.
Yeah, there are local
massive issues of people just parking wherever they want. Now that may seem futile to people watching this and looking from the outside in, but this is what's happening. And there's just a kind of Batley and Spen have become or are fast becoming areas where lawlessness is right.
Including the independent candidate, because we want to make sure that the Conservatives have a good fighting chance. And actually, you think it's a...
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
And we're not about that. We respect people, we respect one another, we're friendly,
Yeah.
And that kind of is getting lost. That there's too much aggression and people, if you highlight certain issues, you have to be very careful, and I'm probably not overly careful in my mantra is, if this is factual and it's truthful, I have no problem saying it.
So you've decided not to stand this time
Yes.
around in the by-election,
Yes.
even though there are a couple of things here. You, I think, as you've just said, vehemently opposed to Tracy Brabin and
Yes.
and basically just think that she's taken it for granted, right? She's
Yes.
just used Batley and Spen
As a stepping stone.
As a stepping stone. She's now the cushy job as the mayor. There's precious little scrutiny in a job like that.
Exactly.
So she's away and off and doing canny. So why then, knowing this and feeling passionate about this, would you stand back and just say, right, we're going to let the Tories have a free run of it? Because there's a lot of people, we've heard from people today saying they're disappointed you're not standing.
Oh, and I understand that. So my feelings with it all were, what do I do? Do I stand and then be accused if Labour get back in that, well, Paul, it was if you hadn't have stood, Labour wouldn't have got back in. But in 2019, when I've presented the figures to people, because people don't look at the figures, they assume that 6,500 people would have voted Tory for me. Well, as we've spoke about
Yeah,
earlier,
that's
there's
not
people that
right.
will not vote in this
Yeah.
election.
Uh-huh.
There's people who had never voted up until the previous election and said, I'm putting my faith in you
Yeah.
because I know you,
Yeah.
I've known you all my life, and we dragged a lot of people, you're not kicking and screaming, but we got a lot of people to the polling booths who had no trust in mainstream politicians. So from my point of view, it's kind of another cliche, you have to take a step back sometimes to go 2 or 3 steps forward, and I sadly believe that whoever wins this election will not do a good job.
Right.
And people, it's a case of the electorate as a whole, and this is unfortunate, but is to get the medicine, and when they taste it, maybe it's not what they think, and then in 2 years' time, when there's a general election, Paul Halloran may be around. But the massive issue is crime, is things like speeding cars, and it may seem futile to people, but obviously there is a crime epidemic in this area. You know, the nearest station is Dewsbury, after that is Huddersfield. You know, the police are manfully, I'm a big supporter of rank and file police officers, but I think there's quite a lot of political policing going on a higher scale, and it's affected this area, and people have become apathetic towards this area and this levelling up, and we're going to bring so many police. Ultimately, they're just replacing the police have taken away. Now, and they're also bribing people, because Ryan Stevenson's campaign is based on, well, I'm a Tory, I'll have an ear to government so I can get you some money. So what are the Tories saying? Are they saying, if you don't vote for our man, we won't give you that money? Surely that's double standards. And also the Towns Fund, for example, Dewsbury's just received 20 odd million pounds via the Towns Fund. There was 101 towns on the list. Batley wasn't even on the list.
Right.
So when did the Tories start caring about Batley?
Yeah.
That's the question people need to ask, but people are quite, sadly, and understandably though, are very apathetic about politics to switch off. And I think with me not standing as well, a lot of people will switch off, and those 6,500 votes, I think the assumption that on the Saturday when I announced that I wasn't standing, I think we were probably doing cartwheels in the Tory party office.
Well, I bet there were, yeah.
But at the end of the day, Tracy Brabin lost 7,000 votes and I gained 6,200 odd.
Yeah.
So the Tories only lost 2.8% in the last election. And if the Tories had have held their vote from 2017, if I wouldn't have stood and they'd have kept the same vote from 2017, they still wouldn't have won in 2019. I think at the moment in time, I think that it's going to be very more close than you think. I think the Galloway factor will come into it massively. I think the assumption is that the Tories may just squeeze it.
Well, there we are.
And with the may.
And you'll be back.
But it's been, but I'm
You're
going
not
nowhere.
going anywhere.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
So that was an interesting chat with Paul, who obviously stood here as an independent candidate in 2019, came third, and he's not standing this time to give the Tories a chance, which he says the Tories, if they do get in, won't deliver for areas like this. He thinks it'll just be politicians taking Batley Spen for granted, or West Yorkshire for granted again. And I wonder, that poses a really interesting question for me. There's the dilemma of, should people have choice ultimately? Should it be right? Is it right that candidates stand aside when actually people want more choice at the ballot box? People don't want to have to vote for establishment parties in all scenarios. Will there be a Brexit bounce? Will there be a vaccine bounce in areas like this? Brexit's done. The vaccine's rolling out at such success that this is the country that wants the vaccine the most. So there are so many factors at play. It's going to be fascinating to see whether or not Labour can just hold on with that Galloway nipping away there at the heels of the party. There's the Batley Grammar School incident, which Paul thinks is a factor at play here, but people aren't talking about it. There are so many interesting ways in which this by-election is proven to be a real test of not just the Labour Party, but of the Conservative Party as well. And it'll tell us just how deep, or skin deep, the Conservative Parties hold in areas where they haven't won for either a very long time or not at all. So we'll see, folks. This is a fascinating test subject. And I'm excited, for one, to see what that election night reveals to all of us. See you next time. Reasoned relies upon grassroots donations from people like yourself that want us to continue producing our high quality, free thinking content. So please do consider clicking the link and donating, no matter how big, no matter how small, because it really does ensure that we can keep on keeping on.